We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day, and in Virginia, voters will be deciding on a new governor. Recent polls show it's going to be a tight race between former Governor Terry McAuliffe, a Democrat, and his Republican challenger, former private equity executive Glenn Youngkin. But Democrats are mobilizing to try and give McAuliffe a boost. Vice President Kamala Harris rallied for the Democratic candidate in Dumfries, Virginia, Thursday. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe attended that rally and joins me now. Hey there, Ed. So what did Vice President Harris have to say about Terry McAuliffe, and what was the overall messaging of this rally?
Good to see you, Lana. Vice President doing what Democrats of a certain variety, big-name Democrats, are going to be doing for the former governor here in the closing days of this campaign, coming into the Commonwealth of Virginia, rallying Democrats, reminding them that they have to go to the polls again, as they do every year after a White House race, to elect their governor. This is, as you said, a single-digit contest between Democrat McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin, a wealthy Republican businessman who has surged into at least a neck-and-neck contest with the former governor, in part because of his focus on education and specifically parental control over what is taught in classrooms, picking up on the furor that has been exhibited at school board meetings all across this state and around the country. But this continues to be a closely watched race because there could be lessons here for Democrats and Republicans ahead of competitive races in congressional and gubernatorial races next year across much of the rest of the country.
Yeah, seeing all of those education ads from Youngkin here on the airways in the DMV. Ed, you sat down with McAuliffe earlier and asked him why this race is so close. I want to play that exchange.
Are you in a tight race because of what's going on in Washington with the president and congressional Democrats?
Listen, I think this election is about what's happening here in Virginia. I do think, Ed, in fairness, people want to see action up in Washington. They really are tired of bickering. They want to see results. They want to see everybody come together. Forget about my election. I am desperate for this infrastructure bill. I mean, that's $7 billion for roads just for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think people like it when government works.
That kind of sounded like a non-committal answer to your question. We've seen McAuliffe distance himself from President Biden, but the two are going to campaign together next Tuesday. Our most recent CBS News poll shows that 52% of likely voters in Virginia disapprove of the president's performance, which you well know. So what is the president and McAuliffe hoping will come out of this presidential visit?
Well, they hope that he can help stoke interest and turnout among Democrats and maybe try to win back the support of those independents who seem to be slipping away. That was one of the most notable elements of our most recent survey, that despite winning this state by 10 points last year, especially on the backs of independent voters, he's now struggling to hold on to their support. That's not unique to Virginia. It's happening up in New Jersey, which holds the other governor's race this year, and in states across the country. That support that was once there for this president has slipped away, and overall his numbers sit now in about the 40s. That has an effect on influencing and enthusing Democrats to go out and vote. We've noticed also in surveys taken in this state, and we see it on the roads, you see it on the airwaves, you see it at the events, enthusiasm among Republicans who support Youngkin seems a lot more juiced than it does among Democrats, and that's typical. It's sort of typical voter behavior. When your party's in power, you're not as hungry necessarily. You're not feeling the urgency. Well, that is what McAuliffe's trying to do in these closing days. He makes a point of saying the president's coming. The former president, Barack Obama, will campaign with him Saturday in Richmond, Virginia. The First Lady's been here and will be back. The Vice President was here tonight, and there likely will be similar trips in the closing days into certain parts of the state if they feel it will help.
You know, it's interesting because while of course you're absolutely right about the party in power having problems at the midterms, it does seem, and that's reflected in that exchange that we played, that there's even more of infighting among that party in power right now among Democrats. I'm wondering then, given all of that, Ed, what might a Youngkin victory mean for Republicans ahead of the midterms next year?
Based on how he's running, Lana, it would be a signal to Republicans that it's okay to put a little distance between you and former President Trump. In fact, in talking to Republican supporters of his this week here in the state, they say he's not really an influence at all. He's not in office. He's not on the ballot. He's not necessarily the reason that I turn out to support Youngkin. He's not the reason I'm a Republican. And so it's a reminder that despite the focus at the national level, despite the focus on social media, despite the former president's public insistence that Republican office holders and candidates have to express loyalty to him, Youngkin, while he has been endorsed by the former president, while he has said that his campaign is inspired by the former president, while he welcomes his supporters into the fold, has made very clear that if he does this and if he wins, he will have done it on his own, without big-name, out-of-state Republicans coming in to help him. And he managed to do it by focusing on a very specific issue of concern to many voters in this state, in this case, education. So run on issues, keep distance from the former president, and be a compelling enough character to win over not only your base of support, but independent voters. Hard to believe, because that seems pretty basic, but it could work in this state for a Republican. And you better believe there will be Republicans across the country if he pulls it off, or even comes close, who think, gosh, if they could do it there, maybe I can do it in other parts of the country. And that'll be a big influence on how much influence the former president has on the GOP going forward.
Well, Republicans will be watching, Democrats will be watching. Ed O'Keefe, I know you're going to be watching. Thanks so much.
Like a hawk. Take care, Lana.